Harold, as a really senior person in IT in FTSE 100 and 250 businesses, what's the key difference that you've seen in identity and that cause and effect that's happening by people not being able to manage that correctly?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. A really important question. Actually, fundamentally, I always think about it in the old days, when somebody left the organization, the first thing they want to do is get hold of their PC, right, and stick it in the cupboard and rebuild it and flash it or put a hammer through it if you want to throw it away. And then you think your data is safe, right? Because the person's left the company and they used to access your company information through the PC.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's completely different because all the access is not based around the PC, it's based around the individual, around that identity. So the security, the way Microsoft sells its licenses, the way you set up policies, it's all based around that individual so they can operate from anywhere, from any device. And you may throw that device away, it has no impact on your company security because that person can log in on any device. It's controlled around the individual. So it's so critical you understand the identity.
Typically, people used to understand identity as this person's in the business and they're allowed to access this system. If that isn't managed correctly because, for want of a better word, people don't have the right amount of data to be confident enough to make the decisions in the world of joiners, movers and leavers, it would be good to understand how you feel that kind of mistake happens in the first place and how people are or are not addressing that.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, my years, and I've done it myself, I've actually been on the operational side of IT as well as an administrator in that in my early years, and there's an inherent fear from an IT perspective that you do something incorrectly for an individual, right? You want to give them great support, you want to do the right things for them. So the last thing you want to do is disable things from them that you feel might compromise their work in some way, or you're doing something incorrectly. So you generally find that in IT, people are a little bit conservative when it gets to leaders and when it gets to restricting access to particular, that you're not kind of used to that frame. You want to give people as much access as possible because you're in IT. Obviously everyone knows secure nowadays, you've got to get more secure, but you therefore need to really fundamentally understand that persona and what they need to do and what they are doing, right? And when we talk about personas in the new world, actually an identity could be a printer, it could be somebody who's left the organization, it could be administration ID, it could be a number of things. You need to understand all of that to make decisions around it. And the more data you give IT administrators, HR, etc., the more confident they're going to be to make decisions. That's the bottom line. So if there's limited data, they tend to not restrict. You give them all the right amount of data, then there's a good chance you're going to get the restriction, which is what you want at the end of the day.
If we have a 2,500 seat or an 80,000 seat organisation, and we've seen in some instances there's more than 500 people that are joining on a month. If we're 3 years down the line from perhaps signing a new Microsoft agreement, and we've missed 10% of those over time, what do you feel the actual effect is on security? What is that doing to the security, with millions of dollars being spent on stopping those ninja hackers while there's hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts that potentially could be a security risk?
It's like so many things, sport, everything else, you forget the basics sometimes, right? And to me, in the identity world, in security, the basics is exactly that, right? Let's make sure we know this person's left the company, or let's make sure we know this account is actually a printer or some other type of device or an administrator. If we don't know that, we are going to make mistakes, and that account then can be easily compromised. We don't know the person exists, so we're not putting the usual security structures around that account. So the impact from a security point of view is quite vast. And I mean, most of the security hacks are through social type interactions, sitting next to people and looking at their iPads, looking at their logins, that type of thing, and maybe they use the same password for one site compared to another. So they could be there and say, well, I know this person used to work at that company, let me go and try and log in with that same ID, right? I know they left the company, but that's how a lot of the hacking actually happens.
So you can even see on a LinkedIn Sales Navigator, tell me who's left this business.
Exactly.
So it's a big hole in people's arsenal.
And what we found, Jack, is we've onboarded many millions of people. Every company we go to just about says we think our HR is okay, or maybe they say they know it's not really okay, or they think it's wonderful. There's yet a company for us that we've connected to that actually understood who's left, right? and who those joiners leavers are, and who what accounts there are that are not actually who they thought they were or what they thought they were, right? It happens like that in every single environment. So you've got to assume your Active Directory is not right, and then you're going to be in a better security perspective, no matter how big you are. And we've seen it from 100 users, 50 users, 20 users, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of users. The same kind of basics. We think the HR system's up to date, but HR doesn't know about everything. HR doesn't know about people that left a long time ago. Sometimes they don't know about contractors. Sometimes they don't know about printer accounts, the distribution accounts. So don't assume it works. Rather assume it doesn't.
So is it actually fair to say that a high majority of the professional global workforce uses Azure Active Directory, perhaps Okta, or a blend of those two technologies? If we're in a situation whereby there are certain habits or things that those Microsoft technologies are doing, are we actually potentially looking at triggers in technology as a trigger in identity, or the fact that somebody is there or not? So we've actually stopped looking at that person and making sure that person's there, and because we can see an email's been read, or we can see some sort of activity on one of these services, we're using that.